Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Learn How to Train. Today we're going to talk about and learn a bit about calcium. And there's to give you some context. And actually, you know what? I'll talk about the story later on. I'll talk about why I'm talking about calcium and like the fundamentals of calcium and why I spent this entire week or the past few days learning as much as I can about calcium and presenting and creating this presentation. But first, I just want you to think about how many times you have been told or how many times you have heard people give blanket statements like you need a calcium supplement. Or how many times have you heard medical professionals just tell you that you need a calcium supplement. If you're facing some bone issues, you need calcium supplements. If you're getting muscle cramps, you need calcium supplements. Like just ingesting a calcium supplement and meeting the recommended daily allowance of your calcium is going to be enough. Uh, so what we'll do today for this episode is that we'll talk about the fundamentals of calcium. We'll talk about why our body needs calcium and how it kind of regulates how much calcium, how the body itself regulates how much calcium the body has. And then I'll talk about the story in a very roundabout way. We'll After we understand everything that there is to understand about calcium, fundamentals, right? All fundamentals, basic fundamentals. Then I'll come to the story about why I started doing this in the first place, and it'll all make sense to you. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you guys as always. Um, Try not to peep into my messy little desktop, but yeah. All right. So okay, learn about calcium, right? So let's get started right away. First of all, this is all the topics that we're going to cover in this presentation. We'll talk about what role does calcium play in the body, how much calcium does the body need to fulfill all these roles, right? And what happens when the level of calcium in the body exceeds the optimal range or drops below the optimal range, how the body kind of regulates that. Because in the past few days that I've spent deep diving into the topic of calcium and calcium homeostasis, and the journey basically that calcium takes through the body and what all it's required for, I've come to realize that the level of calcium that is maintained in the body is a very, very, very tightly regulated process, right? And it's never as simple as just taking a calcium supplement and then all of your problems fading away. It seldom works like that. It never works like that. So we'll talk about all of that, but first we'll just understand the fundamentals, and then it'll just be very easy for us to connect the dots and understand why just simply taking a calcium supplement never helps, right? And that's the last point that I want to talk about. So let's get started. So there are see the thing is that calcium as an element, right? What do you want to call it? An element, mineral, whatever you want to call it's like the ultimate multitasker in the body, as a lot of different minerals are: magnesium, potassium, and all of these things. Calcium is a multitasker, but I thought, like, for the purpose of our presentation, these are a few of the roles, very important roles that calcium plays, that it makes sense to you guys. Right, let's start off with the nervous system. Okay, so calcium is required for something known as nerve signaling. So if you don't realize, your nervous system is basically a bunch of neurons, right? These neurons, if you can look right here, in the presentation, where you can see the action, where I've written down nerves need calcium for signaling. Right underneath that, what you see is a couple of neurons, right? Couple of nerves. Now, how the nervous system works is that every single nerve sends signals to other nerves, and through this connection, they get a bunch of stuff done. Right? If a muscle needs to contract, the nervous system is going to use this network of nerves to send a signal to the muscle. Right? And for this signaling, so it's not just one single nerve, it's a bunch of it's a network of different nerves, right? So a nerve is going to have an axon, it's going to have a stem, or what's also known as a dendrite. I'm not entirely sure if it's called that, but I'm like 90% sure it's called a dendrite. So anyway, these nerves have branches, and these branches connect to each other, and in between those connections are these small terminals called synapses, right? So when a nerve basically sends a signal, which is basically neurotransmitters that travel through the nerves from one nerve to the other nerve, they have to travel through these synapses, right? Through this small little junction in between nerves. And for that transmission to happen, for that proper signaling to happen in between, in between different nerves, calcium is required, because calcium is what kind of opens the gates or enables this transfer or proper signaling of the neurotransmitter between two different nerves. Then in the specific case of a muscle contraction, so just so you know, just so you guys know how a muscle contracts is basically, and there are, there are different types of muscles. There are muscles that contract, that have to keep contracting even without our voluntary involvement, right? Like I can voluntarily make a bicep muscle contract, but the muscles in my esophagus and in my intestine have to, and they do contract without my voluntary input, right? For all the different processes in the body to keep going on, they have to contract. So this contraction is basically nothing but a nerve that is bringing a signal or an impulse from the nervous system to the muscle that the nerve is innervating, right? So the neurotransmitters, they travel through these nerves. They travel through these nerves because calcium enables or affords them that ability. They travel through these nerves and they arrive at this thing called as a neuromuscular junction, which is basically a junction between a muscle and the nerve that is innervating that muscle. Now, when that happens, again, calcium is going to be required, not just for the neurotransmitters to travel from the, from the nerve to the muscle, but the muscle cells itself. Within the muscle cells, there are these small little organelles, right? You've got the cell, and you've got an entire basically ecosystem within the cell. So within these cells, there's this little cell organelle called a sarcoplasmic reticulum, or if it's or an endoplasmic reticulum. And these small organelles, they store calcium ions within them, right? So and this calcium is released into the cytoplasm of the cell or within the cell, and that is what essentially causes a muscle to contract, because this calcium is going to go into the cytoplasm of the cell. It is going to interact with the actin and myosin filaments within a muscle fiber or a muscle cell, and that's going to cause a muscle to shorten and contract. So not only is calcium required for proper signaling of, proper signaling in between nerves or in between a nerve and a muscle, but it's also very important within the muscle itself. So another really important role that calcium plays, and this has got nothing to do with training, but I found this really interesting. Is that the whole process of forming a clot, like let's say if a blood vessel gets damaged, right? So a clot needs to be formed so that the blood vessel can heal. So within that whole process, where first of all, when a blood vessel is broken or damaged, platelets are going to rush to that blood vessel so that they can start for the clotting process, right? So calcium is what kind of activates the platelets so that they can adhere to the site of that injury. Then calcium is also a cofactor in a whole cascade of enzymatic reactions that basically turns fibrinogen, and this is so hard to pronounce, fibrinogen, which is a soluble, protein, and it turns it into strands of insoluble fibrin, which basically forms the meshwork for the clot. And when that mesh forms, that mesh is going to trap more blood cells into it, and that is what is going to solidify the blood clot. So this whole cascade of events where the platelets, sense that there is an injury in a blood vessel, they rush to that site, they get activated by calcium. Then calcium participates in a lot of the enzymatic reaction that creates the fibrin strands that forms the meshwork of the clot. And then it's also necessary for the aggregation of the platelets at the site of the injury, right? So that the platelets can really stick to that. It's also necessary for, now if the clot has formed, the meshwork is created, the platelets have adhered to it, the bloods are, getting trapped in that meshwork. Now, for the clot to really heal, it needs to shorten and it needs to reduce, right? So for that contraction of the clot, again, just very similar to how muscles require, calcium to contract, these clots also require the calcium to contract so that they can contract, shorten, and ultimately the clot can heal and the blood vessel can go back to normal. So that's why the calcium is like the ultimate multitasker, because it's required in so many different things. And these are just some of the few processes in which calcium is required. There are many more. There are many more. So now if all of these things have to be done in the body, and these are like very essential life sustaining processes that need to happen. Your heart needs to beat, your cardiac muscles need to pump the heart, right? And for that to happen, it needs to contract, and for contraction, calcium is required. for every single thing that you do, right from talking, the use of your voice box, to your training, where you're using your muscles, it's all related to muscular contractions. And whenever you think muscular contraction, think calcium, because it's only because of the calcium that gets released out of these small stores within the cells, that enables the muscle to contract, right? And forget all of that. At a very basic level, the nervous system, which pretty much is keeping you alive and making you do every single thing through sending these electrical impulses throughout the body through this network of nerves. For all of that to happen, calcium is required, because the calcium channels is what allows that. So, long story short, there are a lot of sites in the body where calcium is just very, very, very essential, right? So, now for all to carry out all of these processes, it's very easy to understand that there needs to be an optimal level of calcium present in the body, right? So think about where all is the where in what all different sites is the body storing calcium. The biggest site, the biggest store of calcium ever is obviously going to be your bones, right? Your bones have probably 99%, more like 99% of the entire calcium store in the body. And then the rest of the calcium, it is basically circulating in your blood as like ionized, like free circulating ionized calcium ions, or it's bound to proteins like albumin, right? But all of this is circulating within the blood. And then cell organelles in a bunch of different cells. There are these small little organelles, like I told you, like the sarcoplasmic reticulum or the endoplasmic reticulum, which are like small organelles within cells. These are also storing some calcium that can be released and used for a bunch of different processes. So these are like different sites in the body where calcium is present, right? So let's talk about like the free circulating calcium within the blood, right? For all of these processes to happen, the body obviously needs to maintain what is known as a balance of calcium, or free circulating calcium, right? And what you can also call as calcium homeostasis. Homeostasis is just a state of balance, and the body needs to make sure that an optimum level of calcium balance is maintained. Neither can it be too high, nor can it be too low. So that is very tightly regulated and monitored, and the body makes sure that optimum levels of calcium is ensured. And now let's talk about how the body does that, right? So let's say the calcium level. So first of all, let's talk about what is the optimal levels of circulating calcium in blood, which is basically going to be 8.5 to 10.4 milligrams per deciliter. That's how much 8.5 to 10.4 milligrams per deciliter is how much circulating calcium is needs to be in the bloodstream, so that it is optimal for all these life sustaining processes that the body does, that the body needs the calcium for. So what happens if the calcium levels drop? How does the body make sure that it can maintain or upregulate the homeostasis in case there is a dearth of calcium in the body, what is also known as a hypocalcemic state? This is what the body does, right? So we've got like the whole endocrine system, endocrine glands in the body. One of the endocrine glands is the parathyroid glands, which is present in your neck, probably. I'm not entirely sure. It is, right? So your parathyroid gland has these cells, and these cells have these receptors, these calcium sensing receptors, that is constantly keeping a gauge on how much calcium is present in the bloodstream. And whenever these cells sense that the calcium level has dropped below the optimal level, below 8.5 to 10.4 milligrams per deciliter, then it is going to do something to upregulate that, to make sure that, okay, we have a dearth of calcium, we are in a hypocalcemic state. Let's upregulate the calcium. Let's get more calcium flowing into the bloodstream so that we can reach this optimal level. How does it do that? So these sensing receptors in the cells, specialized cells within the parathyroid gland, when they sense that the calcium levels have dropped below optimal, they are going to, promote the synthesis and the release of this thing called the parathyroid hormone into the bloodstream, right? And when the parathyroid hormone goes into the bloodstream, it's going to do a bunch of things to kind of upregulate the calcium that's flowing within the bloodstream, right? Let's talk about that. What all does it do? First of all, it's going to go to your kidney, and it's going to kind of uh, decrease how much calcium is being excreted through the urine, right? And it is going to ensure that the kidney reabsorbs instead of excreting the calcium. the kidney starts reabsorbing more of the calcium back into the bloodstream. So that is one way that the parathyroid hormone upregulates the calcium within the bloodstream. Another very interesting thing and very important thing to keep in mind that it does is that it promotes the conversion of inactive form of vitamin D, which is in like the liver, to the active form, the hormonal form of vitamin D, calcitriol, is within the kidney. And when there is more hormonal active form of vitamin D present in the body, it is going to kind of uh, trigger an increase in the expression of these, channels that absorb more calcium from the intestine to the bloodstream. So it's going to basically upregulate the absorption of more calcium that we ingest through our food or through the exogenous outside the body sources. This more active form of vitamin D is going to basically absorb more calcium into the bloodstream, right? And thereby upregulating how much calcium is flowing within the bloodstream. Another thing that parathyroid hormone does is that, see, the one thing that you might not know about bones, or you might know about bones, is that on a daily basis, bone metabolism is also something that exists. The bones are constantly being mineralized and demineralized, right? They are constantly being formed and destroyed, right, to maintain a certain balance. So when the body senses, and the body knows that we have this huge massive source of calcium in the body, which is the bones, right? So whenever the body senses that there is a dearth of calcium in the body and free circulating calcium in the bloodstream, the parathyroid hormone is going to trigger osteoclast activity. So osteoclast is basically a type of cell present in the bone that breaks down the bone, right? And it triggers resorption of, when the bone breaks down, more calcium is going to start flowing into the bloodstream from the bone, right? So these osteoclasts are what helps the bone do that. Now, when the parathyroid hormone triggers the osteoclast activity, it is going to increase how much calcium is going to go into the bloodstream from the bone. So basically the body starts taking more calcium from the bone and starts dumping it into the bloodstream, because the parathyroid hormone triggers the osteoclasts, which are like the specialized cells that break down the bone, to do that. And all of these things again ensure that optimal levels of free circulating calcium within the blood are maintained. Calcium homeostasis is maintained, so that all the different things that calcium does can be done, right? All those important processes can be carried out. So just to recap, there has to be an optimal level of calcium present, free circulating calcium, apart from the bones, apart from the sarcoplasmic reticulum and endoplasmic reticulum. There has to be free circulating calcium within the bloodstream, so that the bunch of essential processes can be carried out, right? And the body is tightly monitoring these levels. Whenever the body senses, right, whenever the parathyroid gland senses that these calcium levels are dropping within the blood, it is going to release the parathyroid hormone within the bloodstream. The parathyroid hormone is going to go to three primary spots. It's going to go to the kidney, and it's going to downregulate how much calcium is being excreted, and it is going to upregulate how much calcium is being reabsorbed from the kidneys into the bloodstream. The parathyroid hormone, it's going to convert, when it is present in the bloodstream, it is going to promote the conversion of the inactive form of vitamin D in the liver to the active form of vitamin D within the kidney. And then whenever there is a lot of active form of vitamin D or hormone D present in the body, it's going to increase how much calcium the intestine basically absorbs and puts into the bloodstream. The parathyroid hormone is also going to go to the bones, and it is going to promote the breakdown of the bones and dump all of that calcium that it gets from the bone into the bloodstream. And when all of this calcium from all of these different spots flow into the bloodstream, they bring back the state of balance, and they make sure that the homeostasis of calcium is maintained in the body. Right now, another state that the body can go into, another way that the homeostasis can be disrupted, is if the calcium levels rise above optimal. If it goes above 10.4 milligrams per deciliter, right, which is a hypercalcemic state, lots of calcium in the body. An interesting thing to know is that, of course, you can be in a hypercalcemic state if the calcium levels rise above this, but you can also be in a hypercalcemic state. If you think about it, you can go into hypercalcemic state if your body is dehydrated, right? If just the concentration of calcium in the body increases. That's what this is, right? That's what milligrams per deciliter is. So being dehydrated is one of the ways when the body kind of goes into hypercalcemic state or might go into hypercalcemic state. At least that's what I understand. So what happens when this happens, right? Like the parathyroid gland, we have the thyroid gland as well. And this thyroid gland, whenever it senses, again, these thyroid glands also have specialized cells. These cells have receptors, calcium sensing receptors. When they sense that the calcium levels have gone above optimal, they are going to basically trigger the synthesis and release of this hormone called calcitonin, right? Calcitonin is going to be released into the bloodstream from the thyroid gland. And then the calcitonin is going to do a bunch of things. It's going to go to the kidney and it is going to promote more excretion. It's all of this is so simple. It's like a systems. If you think about it in terms of systems, it's all just feedback loops, right? There's a feedback loop everywhere. When the body senses that there's more of calcium present, it's going to do a bunch of things to make sure that all of it can remove the excess. Whenever it senses that there's a dearth of calcium, it's going to do everything that it can to basically upregulate more of calcium within the bloodstream. So this is a hypercalcemic state would be a state where there is excess of calcium. So how do we remove that calcium? Let's increase the excretion. So what does calcitonin do? When the thyroid gland senses that there is more calcium present in the blood than required, it's going to release calcitonin into the bloodstream. The calcitonin is going to basically promote the excretion of calcium, right, and decrease the reabsorption of calcium within the bloodstream at the kidney level. The it's also going to kind of decrease the parathyroid hormone, right, which was doing everything it can to upregulate the calcium levels. It's going to decrease the secretion of that or the secretion of that into the bloodstream, and if there's less parathyroid hormone present in the bloodstream, then there's going to be less active form of vitamin D. If there's less active form of vitamin D present in there, then that's going to basically decrease how much calcium is being absorbed from all the calcium that we ingested from the intestine into the bloodstream. Another thing that calcitonin does is it down regulates bone resorption, right? So like when the calcium levels were low, the parathyroid hormone was stimulating osteoclast activity. It was breaking down more bone and dumping more calcium into the bloodstream. But when the calcium levels are high, it's going to stop that process or kind of down regulate that process. And when that process is down regulated, then less calcium is being dumped into the bloodstream. So these are all feedback loops that the body creates through these specialized cells that are constantly sensing how much calcium is present in the body. And this is how a hypercalcemic state is down regulated, and again calcium homeostasis is achieved. Now you see that this is such a tightly regulated process, and basically if you think about it, the regulation of calcium homeostasis, it directly and indirectly depends on so many different things. Like we discussed, right? It's the parathyroid and the thyroid gland that are kind of sensing the calcium levels in the body. So whether it is able to do it properly or no is going to depend on the parathyroid gland health. It is going to depend on your thyroid gland health. Overall, it's going to depend on how healthy your endocrine system and endocrine response is. It's going to depend on the kidney function. It's going to depend on the intestine function. It's going to depend on your bone health and bone homeostasis. It's going to depend on your own activity levels. What do you do as a person? What are the demands that you're imposing on your body? Calcium also kind of interacts. The transport of calcium heavily depends on magnesium, and the calcium also interacts with a lot of potassium in the bloodstream. So calcium homeostasis indirectly also depends on these different minerals that are present in the bloodstream or not present. And a very, very, very important factor that calcium homeostasis depends on is the active form of vitamin D present in your body. Because as now we have established, it is not just about how much calcium you're ingesting. The story just begins there. It doesn't end there. It's not about how much you're ingesting. It's not as easy as you simply taking a calcium supplement or just making sure you're taking enough calcium and then everything is done. The thing is that if there is not sufficient active form of hormone D or vitamin D, calcitriol present in your body, then your intestine is not going to absorb calcium and put it into the bloodstream. I'm sorry, quick break. Dog got into the room. Yeah, very chaotic for the presentation. Can't have him here. So yeah. So see, it depends on vitamin D so much. So and that's kind of what determines how much calcium is actually being absorbed from all the calcium that you're ingesting in the first place. So now, this is the question I want you guys to ask yourself: is simply taking a calcium supplement enough? And I'm going to end this presentation with a story. So why I started this in the first place, and two things, right? Why I started this in the first place is because a prospective client, who is now a client, they came to me. They told me, can you give me a recommendation for a calcium supplement? And I told them, why do you want to take a calcium supplement? And they told me that they have been recommended by their doctor to take a calcium supplement so that they can fix their muscle cramp issues and some more issues in the body, bone health issues. Um, but so when a doctor or when a medical professional makes a blanket statement like that, when somebody prescribes you a multivitamin, or when they tell you, your bones are weak, you're getting muscle cramps, so you just take a calcium supplement. The story doesn't end there, and now we know that. Now we have established all the fundamentals of how calcium homeostasis is maintained in the body, how tightly this is regulated, how the body has this divinely smart and intricate and intelligent system set in the body that is constantly sensing the calcium levels, up regulating the calcium levels, down regulating the calcium levels. Hormones are involved, the bone is involved, feedback loops are involved. It's not as simple. Your problems will probably not be fixed if you simply take a calcium supplement, right? And the reason why we are talking about calcium in the first place, I am no doctor. I don't have a formal education in this thing. But, science is not about that. It's about understanding fundamentals and principles, and looking for, simplest possible answers to or solutions to these complex problems. Because when you're solving complex problems, you cannot have rigid rules. You cannot have blanket statements, right? You need to understand what would actually be a simple solution that would help us kind of realize an actual change in the phase state that the body is in right now. So when you feel like your calcium homeostasis in your body is disrupted, maybe taking more calcium might not be the best use of your resources, first of all, of your money. There are a lot of other things that you can do. You can look at whether you're making sure that enough vitamin D is present in the body or not. It's as simple as going out in the sun. It can be as simple as going out in the sunlight and just having those UV rays fall on your body, having all that vitamin D synthesis and the metabolism happen, which we'll talk about in a presentation about vitamin D. But that's like, if you think about it, that's like a resource that comes to you at no cost, much more simpler and absolutely free of cost as compared to taking a vitamin D supplement or a calcium supplement. And it's probably going to help you absorb all of the calcium that you're consuming from all of your foods, and you might not have to take that supplement, or you might have to. So we cannot make blanket statements like that until we understand the fundamentals at place, until we do our best to arrive at simple possible answers or solutions, and we run iterations of those solutions to see what's working and what's not working. So I'm not sure if you guys can relate to this. You probably can. All my life, like, I grew up eating a bunch of calcium sandos. Do you guys remember that? 90s kids, right? Anybody in their 20s will kind of remember that. Just mega dosing calcium into the body as if, just ingesting calcium is going to help. So that's what this is about. And what I also did in my study, because, I also have to, this is a genuine problem that a real life client is facing. So, and I have to kind of come up with a practical solution for them. So I've helped them kind of, take a route that does not just involve simply taking them a calcium supplement. Apply some practical, applicable, simple strategies that can help them take care of the problems that they're facing, which includes, figuring out your diet, where all can you get your calcium from, how much calcium you should be aiming for, and where to get it from, and what all different lifestyle mods and habit modifications that you can do to promote the things that help you maintain this calcium homeostasis within the body, which I feel like any given day is going to be a much, much, much better route to take than just simply telling somebody, you know what, you feel like your bones are weak, go take a calcium supplement and hope for the best. So that's what this is about. And the first, yeah, again, the reason that we're talking about this in the first place is because the last presentation was on injury, right? Then you might be thinking about, okay, this is a page about learn how to train. I am a fitness trainer. Why am I talking about injuries that physio should be talking about? Why am I talking about supplementation and, vitamin and mineral science when doctors and scientists should be talking about that? See, the thing is, training is never simply about training. The reason that we train in the first place is so that we have a certain goal in mind, right? We would like to be exuberant in our own individual form of expression. However, we like expressing ourselves, we would like to be exuberant in that, and that's why we create a layer of training that can help support that exuberance. But when you come to that, you will inevitably have to deal with issues like injuries, because you're going to pack on injuries and your limits are going to show up when you go and express yourself in your environment in whatever way or form you choose. You are going to become aware of some limits that you have, limits like injuries, and then you will have to inevitably take care of that in training. So training is not exclusive from rehab. Training is rehab, because rehab and training together is going to help you increase your level of preparedness that you have at any given day for however you choose to express yourself. Similarly, training is not exclusive from health. Without the foundation of health, there's no training. And without the foundation of training, there's no exuberance. There's no you doing your sport or your dance, or however your daily job, however you express yourself. Right. So these are layers. Whatever your form of expression is, your choice of expression is, it has to be supported by a layer of training. And whatever your training basically and your expression, it has to be vitalized by a bottom layer of health and everything that you can do to maintain your health. And these minerals that we should be taking, how our body kind of maintains the homeostasis and uses these different minerals, it's important to understand these things so that you can apply these simple principles and actually see some meaningful changes, or build a foundation that's meaningful. So that's why us as trainers, we need to know all of these fundamentals so that we can apply these fundamentals and so that we can present good solutions to our clients and for ourselves that actually make sense when we're trying to solve complex issues, instead of just giving them blanket statements and having them waste resources into complex and biased intervention methods that do not make sense and that will inevitably fail at some point. It's just a matter of time. So, thanks for tuning in for another episode. I hope this was short. I hope this was concise. Again, this is just thing that I learn in my field of work for solutions that I have to create, for the deliverables that I have to provide. There's a lot of study that goes into it, and I thought, as I learn these things with no formal education, no background in these things, just a little bit of logic, just a little bit of systems thinking, and an unbiased mind, and anybody can learn this and anybody can upskill themselves, especially healthcare professionals, especially trainers and fitness coaches, right? In a world of people that are giving blanket statements, that are peddling multivitamins, you need to be the person that understands and takes the time out to spend resources, time and energy into understanding the fundamentals and principles behind a lot of these complex issues that we are trying to tackle. It takes time, it's an arduous journey, it's a long road, but that's what the game is. That's what the game is, and that's what I'm trying to do. And as I go along, I'm trying to bring you guys along for the ride as well, help you guys level yourself up as well. So thank you for tuning in. I'll be back with another episode. Not really sure on what. Uh, Questions, doubts, and things are always, because this presentation is birthed out of a question that was posed to me through a client. So if you guys have further questions about anything else, just ask them, get in touch with me. That's going to give me more ideas about what all topics I need to cover and create content on, what all topics I need to learn myself about, and then so that I can share that with you guys, because we're all on this learning journey. We're all on the journey of learning how to train better. All right, guys, I'll see you guys for another one.